folly.
It's Latin for many.
Tick.
They'll suck your blood. They'll suck
Politics.
your blood.
Well, we've been identifying trends with some of the radicalization of Christians, really, in this country. And we talked about how it's old news in many respects, but hey,
it's been happening for a long time.
There's nothing new under the sun.
And more specifically, the answer to the question we've been hearing from certain parts of the political spectrum that, democracy is at risk. Somebody's destroying democracy. Democracy's dead and da. It's the whole thing. We're doing this crazy stuff because democracy will die if we don't.
Right.
And, it came to a point where nobody was really buying it anymore. They're like, I don't know, man. It just seems like democracy's doing its thing. What do you mean? What do you mean it's dying? And they didn't have an answer. We identified a couple episodes ago. There it is. That's what they're going to use. They're going to start talking about this. And this is theocracy. They finally have an answer to pull out all the stops and pressure people into voting the way that they want them to vote. And that is, no. It's not just that democracy is at stake. And it's, fascism has sort of lost its power as a mind control term. But this new thing, they finally found the answer: theocracy. And booyah, right on schedule, Gons. They love doing this, and I'm very glad that they do. And what that is confirming the things we point out on this show before they happen. And one example of that is this article from the New York Times: the far-right Christian quest for power. Quote, "We are seeing them emboldened." Political candidates on the fringe mix religious fervor with conspiracy theories, even calling for the end of the separation of church and state. And what is that called? It's called theocracy. I'll give a little intro here, Gons, and then we can jump around to some of the stuff you have.
Sure.
It goes like this. This is by Elizabeth Diaz. 3 weeks before he won the Republican nomination for Pennsylvania governor, Doug Mastriano stood beside a 3-foot-tall painted eagle statue and declared the power of God. Quote, "Any free people in the house here? Did Jesus set you free?" he asked, revving up dozens before him on a Saturday afternoon at a Gettysburg roadside hotel. Mr. Mastriano, a state senator, retired Army colonel, and prominent figure in the former President Donald J. Trump's futile efforts to overturn the state's 2020 election results, was addressing a far-right conference that mixed Christian beliefs with conspiracy theories called Patriots Arise. Instead of focusing on issues like taxes, gas prices, or abortion policy, he wove a story about what he saw as the true Christian identity of the nation and how it was time, together, for Christians to reclaim political power. The separation of church and state was a myth, he said. Quote, "In November, we are going to take our state back. My God will make it so." Mr. Mastriano's ascension to Pennsylvania. Yeah, this is a good word, right?
Yep.
It's very well used. Mr. Mastriano's ascension in Pennsylvania is perhaps the most prominent example of right-wing candidates for public office who explicitly aim to promote Christian power in America. The religious right has long supported conservative causes, but this current wave seeks more. A nation that actively prioritizes their particular set of Christian beliefs and far-right views, and that more openly embraces Christianity as a bedrock identity. Many dismiss the historic American principle of separation of church and state. They say they do not advocate a theocracy, but
bing, yeah.
But argue for a foundational role for the faith in government. Their rise coincides with significant backing among like-minded grassroots supporters, especially as some voters and politicians blend their Christian faith with election fraud conspiracy theories, QAnon ideology, gun rights, and lingering anger over COVID-related restrictions.
Let's just get everything and label it as part of the problem with this rise of theocracy.
Every little thing is about the theocracy.
Yeah.
Their presence reveals a fringe pushing into the mainstream.
Okay, pause, because I have that highlighted.
Yeah, exactly.
The fringe pushing into the mainstream is something that's been happening for a while now. And
as we have sort of ludicrously sat and watched helplessly.
And because we, in sort of alternate internet media, when we were doing our thing, 2011, 2012, 2013, we were kind of loosely labeled the fringe.
Yeah, right.
And it's not something that we came up with. It's just people would be like, oh, this is like the fringe Christian crowd talking about the Nephilim. And eventually it was flat earth and stuff like that.
And much like conspiracy theories of the time, before 2016, conspiracy theories, it could easily be described as more or less kind of a fun hobby,
like a segment of entertainment. A sector of entertainment. Yeah. And it had to do with aliens and stuff more than.
Yeah. Not that the things weren't real, but it wasn't being talked about as like news on the nightly news on corporate mainstream outlets.
Scary bad people. But the mainstreaming of that started taking place with the Trump presidency.
Exactly.
And we noticed as content creators on the internet from quote unquote the fringe that it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Bunch of new truther type people popping up all over the place, and there were varying shades. Some were, super hyper Trump. Some were Q people. Everything in between, right? All these new content creators suddenly getting hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of views on their videos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was
somehow not us, but other people who said the same things we did.
Yeah, well, you got to be selected, to be part of the uprising.
That's true. Yeah, whatever club we were supposed to join, apparently we didn't.
Well, we didn't take the bait fully. I think we had opportunities to really jump on that Trump train and do our thing on as sort of an extension of the whole Trump thing, but. It just didn't feel right. I noticed that it was maybe a positive thing that there was finally kind of a galvanizing pushback against the whole liberal progressive thing. But
felt right. Not even did it not feel right. It felt actively wrong.
Well, that part of it. Yeah. But at the time, what I'm talking about is a separate thing here. At the time, it was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with people realizing what's going on and educating themselves on the reality of how this whole thing has been operating and blah, blah, blah. So there's that part of it, but that quickly turned into, they're just completely taking it over and it's going to be weaponized. And
seems like it.
And we're at a point now where they can really start pushing literal people into places of political power that are actively seeking for like this person says here, church and state, the separation was a myth that we needed.
Yeah. Let's read this all together.
Yeah, continue on. Yeah.
So first, I want to bring to mind, people who've been listening for a while. You've heard me over and over use the term "watch out who's pulling your strings."
Right.
And you can't legislate people into the kingdom of God.
Yes.
And for Christians, especially those who love their nation, it's really easy to hand over.
Yeah.
Your puppet strings, even to someone who seems to have your best interest in mind, but in reality are feeding you something that is not advocated by Christ or in the Bible, and we're seeing a lot of that.
And this is in the context also with the Georgia Guidestones going down, just to mention that. We've talked about it the last couple episodes, but that is thematic
Dr.
here.
Future has a lot to say about that as well. So here's a quote. Quote, "The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is..." So remember earlier in the article, they said, they say they don't want theocracy.
Right.
And then there's this quote, "The church is supposed to direct the government."
They're called theocracy.
That's called theocracy.
The
government,
Lauren.
Yeah. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is also true.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah. Quote, Representative Lauren Boebert, a Republican, and by the way, nice little false equivalency there.
Yeah.
Just because the government is not supposed to direct the church does not mean the church is supposed to direct the government. Yeah. Representative Lauren Boebert, a Republican representing the western part of Colorado, said recently at Cornerstone Christian Center, a church near Aspen, quote, "I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk."
Yeah, they're really on that. They're really picking up on that aspect.
That's the point. That's the number one point.
And I'll just mention, and I won't go down the rabbit trail, but there does appear to be worldwide, and especially in the United States, leading up to a separation of state and money. And maybe this is a way to make up for that. You know, hey, we're really losing the state money combo. So we
very interesting.
We better, because think about the Vatican. They are a theocracy, right?
Yeah.
The whole system is set up as a theocratic thing, but also economically. So if the economics shift, then they would shift too, probably. So I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah. And we don't need to read this whole thing because it is very long and the points are made at the top. But let me just give you a little bit more. A small handful of people who espouse this vision, like Ms. Boebert, have recently come to power with the blend of Christian messaging and conspiracy theories. Again, mixing the conspiracy theory aspect with theocracy. And then it goes on with that Mr. Trump elevated. We got to connect it to the orange man.
Come on.
Others, like Mr. Mastriano, are running competitive races, while most have long-shot campaigns and are unlikely to survive primary races. The Ascension. Second time they've used the word.
They all, in their eyes, in the New York Times' purview, getting up the political ladder is a kind of ascension into a higher, place.
And if you ascend high enough, you get to lie in state and,
you get to hang out with George Washington.
Have your Masonic soul, brought up there with George Washington.
Yeah.
Let me see here. I'm going to stop right there.
Okay.
Because then they go into, the Roe v. Wade thing, religious education.
I do want to mention
Florida law.
Yeah, they mentioned Georgia's Candace Taylor.
The Georgia Guidestones lady.
They don't mention the Georgia Guidestones because I don't think it's culturally into the milieu enough of people like the New York Times to know what's going on with that.
Right.
But they did do the quote from her, I'm glad the SCOTUS decided to join me on the fringe. Jesus, guns, and babies. Why is that word fringe? Dude, the word fringe has been completely taken over.
They're loving it, man.
We can't use it anymore.
I know.
Because if somebody does Google search and looks up, because weren't we part of, there was a fringe radio network thing that we were doing for a while?
They're still going. Yeah, that was the term that described the entire genre. All of our colleagues, it was all called fringe Christian. And we actually kind of recognized this a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we stopped.
And stopped describing ourselves as fringe or fringe Christian.
Yeah.
In fact, we kind of started, we haven't said it in a while, but honestly, I think the evidence continues even more now than it was when I mentioned it before, the new mainstream. I don't think we want to be the fringe. I don't think we are the fringe. In fact, there is this genre of the new mainstream coming up. Now, I think that's a fun way to describe us. Do I think it's real? No.
We're pointing out we're pointing out the weaponization of that word.
Exactly.
Let me just read this paragraph here. Declaring the United States a Christian nation and ending federal enforcement of the separation of church and state are minority views among American adults, according to the Pew Research Center. Although support for church-state integration is above average among Republicans and white evangelicals, many Christians see that integration as a perversion of faith that elevates nation over God. The fringe vying for power is still a minority among Christians and Republicans. Yeah. So it's never going. We'd be in big trouble if these guys really truly ascend. And I don't know about big trouble, but it would definitely be.
It wouldn't be great.
It would be an invitation for just Vatican 2.0, basically, in the United States.
Yeah.
And then it quotes Mr. Seidel, quote, "We're seeing them emboldened. They're claiming to be the true heirs of the American experiment."
Yeah. Yeah. And there may be people listening to this who might be a little triggered by some of the things we're saying. And, they might be still kind of in the, America was a Christian nation and it was founded to be a Christian nation. And we've done interviews with authors before and have done the breakdown and saw the documents and done the whole thing about how, well, first of all, we know that our forefathers weren't Christians, not in the way that we're thinking of. They were deists.
Many were deists. Yeah.
Yes, they were deists, and they were not Christian. They would not be recognizable as Christians today.
They found Christianity to be a useful tool or had some good ethics.
In their own words. Yeah. In their own words, that's what they would say. So the founding fathers were not Christian in the way that we would like to think of them. And in the mid 20th century, I mean, just explicit use of Christian propaganda by the White House to basically completely invent that idea as a means to accomplish political goals, which was very effective, but also not true. So those are just things to keep in mind. And that can be very, this is why we aren't as big as some of our colleagues, is because we talk about this kind of stuff. And it's very unpopular.
Some of and
it doesn't feel good to be reminded that the idea that we think America was supposed to be a Christian nation, it does not feel good to be reminded that that is not true and is propaganda. And that's why we are who we are, Gons.
we toe the line between all this stuff and try not to get taken out in the process, which we've been hitting multiple times. You and I were talking about right before the show too. Like we've gone through some stuff, man. We've gone through quite a bit,
and we'll go through some more.
We'll go through more. Yeah.
So that's the whole message of that article, and it's just so wonderful. I just love it, man. It's just you know what? I'll just say it. Sometimes we nail it. We just nail it, and it feels good. All right. Okay. But another example of this, just to give you another example, that this is a media-wide movement to talk about how theocracy is coming for us all, and that's why you got to vote Democrat. Head on over to Vice.com. The headline: Christian fascist propaganda is all over TikTok.
Oh no! They've taken over TikTok. Christo-fascists.
TikTok has a growing online subculture that's propping up surging Christian nationalist and Christo-fascist ideology in the United States and beyond. And it's just about basically the exact same points being made in the New York Times, but this is more about how the religious extremists are getting our children and turning our children into Christo-fascists, and we'll be living in a theocracy, etc.
We should start we should start our own 4chan and call it 7chan for a Christian 4chan.
777 Chan. So that is just to show you that this is not a one-off New York Times thing. The message has gone out, and this is the messaging preparing for the midterms, and has potential to really turn the tide.
Yeah, it just adds fuel to the fire when it comes to the Democrat side of the aisle having a reason to go out and vote. It's meant to trigger them. That's why it's on all these mainstream outlets. So that's part of it too. But also, they're definitely really accelerating that whole narrative about the dangerous Christians. So that's not surprising. In the meantime, I wanted to do this because it's it was talked about, but it was also interesting that the Washington Post would write this story. And the headline here, it's under fact checker from the Washington Post. And the headline is, a one-source story about a 10-year-old and an abortion goes viral. Oh, interesting. And then it starts off with a quote. It quotes Joe Biden from July 8th saying this, quote, "This isn't some imagined horror. It's already happening. Just last week, it was reported that a 10-year-old girl was a rape victim. A 10-year-old girl, and she was forced to travel out of state to Indiana to seek to terminate the pregnancy and maybe save her life." End quote.
Yeah,
this is the account.
And the story, when he told it, I think he told it more than once. One of them, he was like, is that the girl, it was her uncle's baby or something. Just like the most horrifying.
Just make it as horrible as possible. Yeah.
It's just the most horrible example of why Roe v. Wade should not have been overturned.
So, okay, this is, again, remember, this is the Washington Post, Bezos outlet, right? Which starts to kind of make sense here. This is the account of a one-source story that quickly went viral around the world and into the talking points of the president. The Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade, which had guaranteed a right to abortion, has led a number of states to quickly impose new laws, yada, yada, yada. On July 1st, the Indianapolis Star, also known as the Indy Star, published an article written by the newspaper's medical writer about how women seeking abortions had begun traveling from Ohio to Indiana, where less restrictive abortion laws were still in place. Quote, patients head to Indiana for abortion services as other states restrict care, the article was headlined. That was a benign headline, but it was the anecdotal beginning that caught the attention of other news organizations. The article said that 3 days after the June 24th court ruling, an Indianapolis obstetrician gynecologist, Caitlin Bernard, who performs abortions, received a call from, quote, a child abuse doctor in Ohio. A child abuse doctor in Ohio who had a 10-year-old patient who was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant, unable to obtain an abortion in Ohio. Quote, the girl soon was on her way to Indiana to Bernard's care, the Star reported. The only source cited for the anecdote was Bernard. She's on the record, but there is no indication that the newspaper made other attempts to confirm her account. The story's lead reporter, Sheree Rudofsky, did not respond to a query asking whether additional sourcing was obtained. A Gannett spokeswoman provided a comment from Bro Crift. Is that a person's name?
Bro Crift.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, so we got, what is it? Crift. Wait, what was the other guy? Krompt. Yeah, a lot of interesting names today. The newspaper's executive editor, quote, the facts and sourcing about the people crossing state lines into Indiana, including the 10-year-old girl for abortion, are clear. We have no additional comment at this time. The story quickly caught fire, becoming a headline in newspapers around the world, and then it mentions the Daily Mail, The Guardian, Jerusalem Post, Bangladesh Weekly. On CNN's Sunday interview show on July 3rd, South Dakota Governor Kristi L. Noem was pressed about the story. Noem, a Republican who opposes abortion rights, said the story was tragic and the focus should be on the rapist. Yeah, that's one point that a lot of people were pointing out too. Why is there no mention about the rapist? We care more about this abortion of this 10-year-old girl. As much as we can talk about, this is a quote, as much as we can talk about what we can do for that little girl, I think we also need to be addressing those sick individuals. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, and it goes on and on and on. Bernard declined to identify to the fact checker her colleague or the city where the child was located. Quote, thank you for reaching out. I'm sorry, but I don't have any information to share, she said in an email. Dan Tierney, press secretary for Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, said the governor's office was unaware of any specific case, but he said under the state's decentralized system, records would be held at a local level. Thus, he said it would be hard to confirm a report without knowing the local jurisdiction to narrow the search. He added, quote, the rape of a 10-year-old certainly would be newsworthy. As a spot check, we contacted child services agencies in some of Ohio's most populous cities, including Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, and Toledo. None of the officials we reached were aware of such a case in their areas. So, look at this. The Washington Post doing actual journalism, checking in to see.
Actual journalism. Yeah. It's actually very impressive.
Which makes sense based on Bezos's temperament recently against Biden. We skipped the story due to time a couple episodes ago, but Bezos went in on Biden. When Biden tweeted about, hey, gas stations, you guys need to lower the prices. And Bezos was not happy about that. So very interesting. Bottom line here, this is the end of the article. Bottom line, this is a very difficult story to check. Bernard is on record, but obtaining documents or other confirmation is all but impossible without details that would identify the locality where the rape happened.
Yeah.
And,
so they're saying there is no way to confirm whether this is true or not. And not only that, you may have missed it, folks, because Biden certainly did, that it was a mention by a doctor who was losing her job that it that it happened. It was mentioned on a phone call with a doctor losing her job who was outraged by the Roe v. Wade decision, who just sort of spouted it, who just sort of said it on a phone call. No way to what is the word? What am I trying to say?
Confirm, yeah.
No way to verify it. Not only that, when they tried to verify it with the doctor who said it, that doctor said, no, I won't tell you who the doctor was, or I won't tell you anything. I won't tell, and yeah, sure. I don't know exactly how HIPAA or privacy laws would
interesting
would
how
apply in that situation, but it is convenient that it basically creates a situation where this doctor can say whatever she wants and doesn't have to verify. Not even she has to verify it. She doesn't even have to give the reporter a lead on someone else who could verify it. Right. So an entirely unverified story on the most sort of extreme example of why Roe v. Wade shouldn't have been overturned, that made it all the way to the president's speech. And look, any Biden fans out there, or you don't even have to be a Biden fan, you just got to be a Democrat and say, yeah, well, Trump did it. Trump did stuff like that all the time. Look, yeah, he did, and it wasn't great. It's not great. Not great for him. He was impeached twice. The conviction never went through, but he's also sort of the most hated man in the world right now, as far as the mainstream media is concerned. So there's no point there. The point is President Biden used what seems to be an entirely made up story and said it
from an executive order based on some of this?
Based on that, right.
Come on.
So...
And
there you go.
If it wasn't enough, go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, if it wasn't enough for WAPO to actually do this, we had to check. Snopes also did their own fact checks. So Snopes.com. Did Ohio's abortion ban force a 10-year-old rape victim to travel to Indiana? The story went viral after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And, I did the quick scan. Usually they have a big old check mark or a big old X mark.
They're what do they call it? They're ruling.
Right. No ruling here. So
they just left it open.
Yeah, they left it open. They go through the thing and it says here, as of this writing, Bernard had not returned our request for an interview. So they got ghosted. Snopes got ghosted by Bernard.
By Snopes.
Not WAPO, though. WAPO, at least WAPO got a response from her. But Snopes got ghosted, and we had not been able to independently.
You're going to panic, right? If you made up a story that got repeated by the president, if WAPO calls, you say, no, sorry, I can't help you.
They're big enough, yeah.
But when Snopes leaves a message, you're like,
Snopes is calling. Do you think they did that? What should we do? What should we do? Was Bernard lady? Oh no, Snopes is on our tail.
Oh,
don't respond.
Snopes is on the case. And it's funny because, of course, Snopes has made rulings on, whatever rumors or single Twitter posts or whatever. And they're not shy about just throwing out rulings even when there's not enough information. And this one, there was not information, and I've never seen them just not have a ruling on it.
And then they summarize the situation with Bernard, where she got the information, and then it says this: as we have previously reported at Snopes, although medical privacy laws prevent healthcare workers from sharing the personal details of patients publicly, social media posts have circulated widely alleging various harrowing effects of recent abortion bans on pregnant people. So their retort is, well, we can't really verify this, and they're not answering the question, and there's no. But ever since the
Twitter
reversal,
chatter is out of control.
You better check out the stories on Twitter. It's out of control. This reversal has destroyed the lives of women everywhere. It's wild, man. And I love that they appeal to the privacy law thing when they can't find anything to push back on this.
Yeah. I mean, they don't care about the privacy law when it comes to like vaccinations or, anything else. But when they're being pushed back on a invented story, then they care very much about the privacy law.